Hey there, welcome into the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel and podcast network. It is Thursday, February 5th, about 10 o'clock on the East Coast, and Thursday means we have a Bracketology show. We're going to reveal our full field of 68, talk some bubble talk. We're going to spend pretty much the entire show talking about this Bracketology. We'll talk bubble. We'll talk some mid-majors to look out for. So, of course, I said on our last show when we were, we do our week preview, we were previewing this week. I'm like, I don't think a ton is going to change in the Bracketology from last week to this week because it's been kind of a slower week. Well, last night we saw three incredibly notable upsets, so we are going to talk about those games just real quick. Probably we're going to spend less than just a couple minutes on those games, talk about how that influenced the seed lines for these particular teams. Some teams actually jumped into the bracket. We'll talk about those. But the meat of the show is going to be that full field of 68. We'll talk about the numbers behind it. Of course, your resume averages, your predictive averages. I've got some graphics to show you. So we will dive all into those things. Before we do, though, we are going to be ad-free today. Be sure to hit that like button and turn on this, subscribe to the show and turn on the post notifications as well. We're going to do Bracketology shows every single Thursday. Every once in a while, we might have a Friday Bracketology, but every Thursday from now on will be Bracketology. And follow us on Instagram at Bracket Science with 2 S's in the title. All right, let's just talk about what happened briefly because these led to some big seed line changes going back to Monday, just real quick. Number 11, Kansas did win at number 13, Texas Tech, 64-61. Kansas now won 6 straight games. They're playing really well. Is Darren Peterson back in the lineup? Darren Peterson had 19 points. Really wasn't much of a factor for a lot of the game until he knocked down a game-tying 3 and then the eventual game-winning 3. And what is even more notable, he played 35 minutes in this game. So he did play at the end of the game. He hasn't been able to play at the end of the game very much. He did in this one and kind of showed the clutch gene a little bit. Gets the job done there. It should be noted, though, for Texas Tech, Christian Anderson did not play. He just was battling an illness, as most of the country is battling right now. So that is obviously a huge thing. He's their, NBA guy, probably first-round pick. JT Toppin was held to 10 points, 5 of 18 from the field, and all the credit in the world there goes to Flory Badunga. Flory Badunga had a really underrated game. He had 14 points, 9 rebounds in this one, and defended JT Toppin incredibly well. Flory Badunga is one of the best shot blockers in the country. He's one of the most important pieces for this Kansas team going forward to continue looking like a national championship threat. Lawan Watts did have 19 points, 12 rebounds. However, it wasn't very efficient at all. 8 of 22 from the field. Teams, good coach teams like Kansas, like UCF even, they were just begging Lawan Watts to shoot the 3. Ever since they've started doing that, since teams have started doing that, he has been taking the bait. He was 2 of 7 in this one, not great, but those are wide open 3s. Ever since that started happening is when this, little dry spell has happened for this Texas Tech team on the offensive end. Kansas is a really good defensive team all the way through. Without Christian Anderson, it was a tough spot for Texas Tech, but Kansas does get a huge victory there. North Carolina did beat Syracuse. No surprise there. They were up 32 at one point. Syracuse fought back, but Syracuse, no good. Then the other one I just did want to note, I guess we'll note these two. Stephen F. Austin did beat McNeese. So Stephen F. Austin now has a 2-game lead in the Southland. It's a 2-headed race. We'll see who's going to win that conference tournament to be either a 12 or 13 seed. And then NC Central did beat Maryland Eastern Shore to take the lead in the MEAC, So 2 notable ones that will influence our bracketology. Moving on to Tuesday, where the only 2 games we're really going to, we'll talk about 3 sort of, I guess. NC State won at SMU, 84-83. Huge win for NC State here, seed line booster. Darian Williams had 25 points. Quadir Copeland with an interesting stat line, only 7 points, 10 rebounds, and 16 assists, though. What a game for Quadir Copeland. NC State, very, very much so in the field right now. They were on the bubble for a while, but they're in the field right now. SMU still in the field, but sliding a little bit. Indiana did lose to USC 81-75. So Indiana's quad 1 winning streak comes to a loss here. Elijah Arenas had his best game for USC, stepping into a big role, 29 points. But the bad news for USC, Chad Baker-Mazara left the game with a knee injury. I've heard as of now, Eric Musselman thinks it's a sprained MCL. However, it looked pretty ugly. USC has they've been the unluckiest team so far this season, in my opinion, with the Elijah Arenas injury earlier, just now getting back. Then Rodney Rice, who was playing like an all Big Ten guy, out for the season. Now Chad Baker-Mazara, your 3 most important players, all battling injuries. So tough for USC, but good to still get a good win here. Both teams in the field right now. The only other one we'll mention, Miami of Ohio did win at Buffalo. They escaped another one, 73-71, to continue to be an undefeated team. All right, now let's just talk about Wednesday. Those games that we mentioned just happened, of course, changing a bunch of stuff. Number 6, Gonzaga lost at Portland. Portland's a sub 500 team. They're not a very good team. Gonzaga loses 87-80. They were 22.5-point favorites coming into this game, even on the road. Weird one. Very, very weird one here for Gonzaga and Mark Few. They are playing without Braden Huff, as we mentioned. However, I said on the last show, I'm like, this Braden Huff injury, like you need him for the offensive end, but it should elevate your defensive ability. Give up 87 points to Portland, court storm there. So Portland gets the job done. This was a seed line and a half loss for Gonzaga. Number 10, Michigan State loses at Minnesota, 76-73. A lot of people have been getting on Jeremy Fears for, having some questionable, we'll say, he's getting a lot of comparisons to Grayson Allen in college. Now, I will say I loved Grayson Allen in college. I loved watching him play. He had a beautiful shot, could jump out of the building. He's obviously taken it to the next level and been a good NBA player. But Jeremy Fears is getting those comparisons in terms of the tripping and flopping and, just kind of dirty playing. I know there's been quite a bit of talk about that on social media. Minnesota, they're a well-coached team. Niko Medved is going to win there. He doesn't have a lot of NIL money. Minnesota doesn't have near enough NIL money to compete in the Big Ten, but they're going to pick off teams. They've already picked off Indiana. They picked off Iowa. Now they've beaten Michigan State. They made the right hire with Niko Medved. Good win here. There was a fun little video at the end where they were, the locker room after Niko Medved entered. It was kind of cool. Go look that one yourself. Number 16, BYU did lose at Oklahoma State, 99-92. Oklahoma State, we'll talk about them a little bit more in the bubble talk. They might be better off than you think. Anthony Roy, 30 points, 5 of 10 from 3 in this one for Oklahoma State. BYU is struggling. AJ Devanza did have 36 points. What's scary for this BYU team, AJ Devanza had 36 points. You got to knock a ton out of your best player. Richie Saunders had 20 points and 8 rebounds. He also played well and was efficient from the field. Rob Wright also played good. Your big three all played good, and you still lost to a team that's right on the bubble. I know it's a home court environment for Oklahoma State, but BYU just not getting enough from their other pieces. Kennard Davis, Kebakeda did not play well in this game, so you're going to lose some of these games without those supporting pieces. All right, just going through the rest of these kind of quickly. Utah State won at New Mexico. Big win here. Utah State is back in good form now, looking like by far the best team in the Mountain West. They dominate at the pit. Texas A&M did lose at Alabama, so Texas A&M and Florida, now your top 2 teams in the SEC, tied. Houston destroyed UCF. Houston looks awesome. Kingston Fleming's awesome. Kentucky destroyed Oklahoma. Kentucky's starting to get on the right page. Otega always been playing well. Clemson won at Stanford. Not a lot of teams have really won at Stanford. It's been a tough place to play for this East Coast to West Coast swing. Clemson did get the job done. Seton Hall lost to Villanova. Seton Hall is not in good shape right now. Illinois dominates Northwestern. My goodness. Iowa with a little bit of a tricky one. Won at Washington. Baylor beat Colorado. So Baylor's still hanging on, but barely. Tulsa won at Florida Atlantic. So Tulsa is your best team in the American right now. And then Georgetown beat Creighton. Georgetown sneakily playing some decent ball. Creighton is not. All right, so that's everything that happened that's going to influence our seed line changes. Let's pull up the Bracketology graphics. So here it is. This is our Bracketology seed list as of February 5th. So like I said, we are going to talk about some of the stats. I will kind of hover back and forth between that. And this is just the team sheet on barttorvik.com. You can check it out. The link is down below in the description. This is a lot of the metrics that are used for the, the selection committee, as they have their full information on every single team that, is in place to be in March Madness. So let's talk about your 1 seeds. Arizona, I did actually make a change at 1 seed. I did change Michigan and Duke. Nothing that Duke did wrong, but Michigan's previous wins have, Michigan was like 7th, 8th in strength of record for a while. Now their past couple wins have boosted them up to 4th in strength of record and 4th in wins above bubble. That was enough for me to boost them ahead of Duke. I know Duke, has more quad 1 wins and more quad 1A wins, but and their strength of record and wins above bubble are a little bit better, but the predictives are much better for Michigan. Michigan's hovering between 1 and 2 at KenPom. I believe right now they're 2 by like 0.1 or something. And they are first at Torvik compared to Duke being 6th at Torvik. So to me, that's enough to get Michigan to that second number 1 seed. But either way, if this were to happen, it really wouldn't matter too particularly much, because Arizona would be your 1 seed out west, Michigan would be your 1 seed in the Midwest, and then Duke would pick to go to the East. And then UConn is your final number 1 seed as well. Still in good shape, just haven't really been Haven't really been tested in Big East play yet. They do have a big one on Friday, which we will preview tomorrow. We're not going to preview this weekend. We are going to have just a separate show to just preview the weekend because we have a huge one on Friday, like we said, UConn and St. John's. Then we have Duke and North Carolina. So we're going to preview all those games. It'll be a completely separate show. But UConn's still right there. They've been playing better as of late, which has improved their KenPom ranking, their Torvik ranking, so still as a 1 seed. Your first 2 seed would be Illinois right now. They're 4th in the net. 5th at KenPom, 4th at Torvik. Been playing, they're as hot as anyone in the country. Arizona and Illinois, to me, are your 2 hottest teams in the country right now. Illinois is still in really good shape. Iowa State, don't forget about Iowa State. They are still right there. I know they suffered 2 losses in a row. Since then, they played really good. They're 5th in the net. They're 4th at KenPom right now. 4th at KenPom. 5th at Torvik. They're 5-1 in quad 1, 7-1 in quad 2, 12-2 inside the first 2 quadrants. That's really good. This team is really good. They have a veteran point guard. They got Milan Momcilovic, who is looking like the best shooter in the entire country. And they have Josh Jefferson, who's one of the best players in the country. I think Iowa State is a Final Four, even national championship threat. This team's really good, as is Houston. Everyone knows, Kingston Flemings has been awesome. By the way, be sure to come back for tomorrow's show because, like, as we're mentioning, Kingston Flemings, Keaton Wagler from Illinois, who's obviously been fantastic. Cam Boozer. What do all these guys have in common? They're all the leading scorers of these top seeds, and they are all freshmen. So that's going to go into our stat tomorrow. How many freshmen have been the leading scorer of teams to win a national championship? So that's going to be one of our stats tomorrow. It's going to be a little bit less than you think, as we're going to do some Friday, Saturday bracket stats sort of thing. So that's going to be included in our weekend preview. So be sure to come back for that. So Kingston Flemings leading Houston to a 2 seed. And then Nebraska still hanging on as the last number 2 seed. Now, the 3 seeds are where chaos completely happened because I had Michigan State as a 3 seed, had Gonzaga as a 3 seed. Kansas is all the way up to your first number 3 seed. This team has been playing incredibly well. They are 5th in KPI, which is another strength of record metric. They're 13th in strength of record, so that would put them as like a 4 seed, but they're 8th in wins above bubble, which would put them as like a 2 seed with that KPI. And then with your predictives, 11th at KenPom, 12th at Torvik, and they're 4-3 inside quad 1A. There are only a couple teams that have 4 quad 1A wins. They are Arizona, Duke, Illinois, UConn, and then Virginia, actually, and Kansas. Those are your teams with 4 quad 1A wins. So Virginia going to be a little bit lower, as not all quad 1 games are created equal. Not all quad 1A games are created equal, but Kansas in really good shape. I still have Purdue as your next number 3 seed. I don't know why anyone would drop them below a 3 seed because they don't have a metric on the team sheet that is worse than 12. So I know I'll keep forgetting to pull this graphic up, but if you just look at Purdue's metrics, it's really good. Like their worst one is 12th in strength of record, 10th in wins above bubble, 8th in KPI, 9th at KenPom, 9th at Torvik, 8th in BPI, and 8th in the net. So they are still in really good shape. I don't know why anyone would drop Purdue too terribly far. I know they don't look great, but they're still right there in good shape. Up next is your 3 seed, and now your new automatic qualifier out of the SEC would be Florida. So Florida is now tied with Texas A&M. Florida, to me, still is a national championship threat. I wouldn't necessarily pick them, but I do think they have all the requisites to do it. As Boogie Fland is coming into his own, playing really good ball. They're 7th at KenPom, 8th at Torvik. Their resume-based metrics aren't quite all the way there. 19th in strength of record, 19th in wins above bubble. But those predictive metrics are going to boost them up, along with being the projected automatic qualifier out of the SEC. The winner of the SEC, as long as it's Kentucky or Vanderbilt, I'm sorry, Texas A&M. I don't think it's going to be Texas A&M, although they look really good. And Florida actually plays A&M this weekend, so once again, be sure to come back for that preview. But so maybe Texas A&M can make something happen. They would be the one where if they were to win the SEC, they probably would be like a 5 seed. But however, if it's Florida, Vanderbilt, Alabama doesn't look like they can probably do it. But even Kentucky is like half a game back. Like they're still right there. They could maybe get up to like a 4 seed, but I do think it's going to be Florida. And I don't think if Florida wins the SEC that they'll be any worse than probably even maybe a 2 seed. And then Vanderbilt right behind them. Vanderbilt did lose to Florida at home earlier in the season, but Vanderbilt's still been playing really good. They were kind of written off after losing a couple games in a row, but since then they've been blowing everyone out. They're still a really good team. Next up, 4 seed Michigan State. So the most surprising one about Michigan State is I'll pull up this graphic right now. If you take a look at it, so they're 13th in the net if you need to find them. They don't have a quad 1A win. So if you look through it, Houston also doesn't have a quad 1A win, which is very, very strange. In fact, they're 0-2 with the game against Tennessee and at Texas Tech. So, it's kind of weird to see that. But Michigan State also without a quad 1A opportunity or without a quad 1A win. And they have had 3 opportunities. Now, they were also tough ones: neutral site game against Duke, the game against Michigan, or excuse me, it was a home game against Duke, and then the game against Michigan at home, which they lost, and then at Nebraska, they've lost all 3 of them. They're 5-4 in quad 1. Houston obviously is still 5-2 in quad 1 plus 7-0 in quad 2 for 12-2, which is a little bit better. But Michigan State still does not have a quad 1A win, which is why I got them down as a 4 seed, and why you'll see BYU a little lower, because BYU also does not have a quad 1A win. Gonzaga also down to a 4 seed, and quite frankly, they're not going to be able to jump up too high. That loss against Portland was a quad 3 loss. They are the only one until, who will we talk about first? St. John's, probably, who you will see as a 6 seed. They're the only one with a quad 3 loss. Now, it's going to be a little bit tougher in the WCC. There's a lot more quad 3 games than the likes of St. John's, even though the Big East isn't very good. It's still not quite to the WCC level. So Gonzaga with a quad 3 loss got them as a 4 seed. Texas Tech is still right there as a 4 seed. They have some of the best wins in the country, although they are starting to rack up some losses. They have 2 quad 1A wins, which is very good for a 4 seed. Virginia, like we said, in really good shape. Now, their quad 1A wins aren't quite as good as the others, which is why their strength of record and wins above bubble aren't quite as good. Like, their quad 1A wins are at Texas, at NC State, at Louisville, at SMU. That's pretty good. 4 games on the road. However, none of those teams are currently ranked, which I know it's just rankings, but or none of those teams are, what's the highest ranked team? I guess Louisville's actually still ranked, but Louisville's 18th in the net, NC State's 24th in the net, so they don't have any like top 10 wins, anything like that. So they're still right there, but still in good shape. Tennessee as your first number 5 seed, they've climbed a ton over the past couple of weeks. I believe I had them as a 7 seed maybe a month ago or so. They've really climbed up, have started to play a lot better basketball. They have 3 quad 1A wins. They've played a really tough schedule, so their strength of record 17th in wins above bubble. Still in good shape. Like we said, BYU is also a 5 seed. They don't have a quad 1A win, and they are starting to struggle a little bit. There was a lot of talk about, like, this team's got the highest ceiling out of maybe anyone in the country. I don't think so whatsoever, because, I don't think Keba Keita is a bad player, but he's going to have to play his best game, along with Kennard Davis is going to have to actually knock down some shots for this team to be a legit national championship threat. It's a lot. I say it all the time. It's a lot different winning 4 games than 6 games in the NCAA tournament. I know that seems obvious, but it is very hard to, once you get to the Final Four, to beat 2 elite level teams to win the national championship. I don't think BYU is quite all the way there. Alabama right behind them. I know Alabama has a lot of losses, but they've played a incredibly tough schedule. They're 15th in wins above bubble. That's really good. They have 2 quad 1A wins, 3 quad 1 wins. I know they got some losses, but when you play the schedule Nate Oates plays, he sets you up for a good positioning to be a good seed in March Madness. North Carolina as your next number 5 seed. Weird resume. I'll pull up their resume, actually. So they are way down at 27th in the net. They're 24th in strength of record, 22nd in wins above bubble. Not great. 30th at KenPom, 28th at Torvik. So it's not great, but then you go to the quadrants and they're 3-2 in quad 1A. That's really good. 4-3 in quad 1. They're positive in quad 1A and in quad 1 in total. Only 2-1 in quad 2, but to me, just those beating the elite high level teams, their quad 1A wins are at Virginia, against Kansas, and then at SMU, or at Kentucky, excuse me. At Kentucky, they lost to SMU. So pretty good, overall body of work for North Carolina, even though if the metrics aren't quite all the way there yet, which is why I lean them over Arkansas just by a hair. Arkansas is actually better in strength of record and even better in wins above bubble. They're, better in KenPom, not better in Torvik. But when you go to the quadrants, it's 3-2 for North Carolina to 2-5 for Arkansas, 4-3 in quad 1 total against 4-6 for Arkansas is why I lean North Carolina over Arkansas. And North Carolina has, Arkansas has kind of proven they can't win not at their home, not at Bud Walton. And they did just lose their first game of the season at home to Kentucky. Bart Torvik does actually have Arkansas as a 6. As you can see, this is based on his T rank, so it's not like a real bracketology. It's just based on the Torvik metric. He also has Arkansas just a slight hair behind, but it's really close. I see the argument for Arkansas over North Carolina. I just went with Arkansas a little bit behind just because they haven't quite proven that they can win on the road yet at an elite level. So they're still fine, but I know they did win on a neutral against Texas Tech and that kind of stuff. So there's an argument, but I ended up going with North Carolina right there. It's probably going to come down to this North Carolina versus Duke game, whether North Carolina is ahead of Arkansas or behind them. I know it's like you lose to Duke, that there's no harm there. But however, I do think it's that close where Arkansas could jump them. So we talked about Arkansas. St. John's as your next number 6 seed. They've been playing really good as of late. I know they had that quad 3 loss to Providence. Since then, they've been kind of on a roll. They got a big one as well on Friday. Clemson just rolling. They won at Stanford, like we said. They're in really good shape. They aren't the sexiest team. They just kind of play good basketball. Nothing too spectacular, no elite firepower, just a well-coached, solid team, disciplined team. And then St. Louis is up to a 6 seed for me out of the A10. This team is so good. This team is fantastic. I hope they get a favorable matchup come March Madness because this is a team I want to take to the Sweet 16. They're a lot of fun. They can really score the ball. This isn't just a good story. This team is one of the top 25 best teams in the country. Louisville as your next number, as the first number 7 seed. It was really close for me between St. Louis and Louisville. Very different resumes. St. Louis has a better resume. However, Louisville is favored by the predictive metrics. I end up going with St. Louis, but it is very close. Louisville kind of been disappointing this season. UCF with a completely opposite resume of Louisville. UCF has a very good resume, not good predictives whatsoever. So it's like, how do you argue those two? I went with Louisville over UCF, but it's very close. Auburn up next. They've suffered a lot of losses. Have played a really tough schedule, though, and have been playing much better as of late in SEC play, racking up some big wins. Kentucky right behind them as a 7 seed. Kentucky, like I said, they're right in the race for the SEC conference, which is just crazy. Mark Pope's done a really good job. I know you might say, like, well, part of his job is to build the roster, and I understand that it's not a very well-built roster, but he's done a good job with the X's and O's and getting this team to play together. Up next, first 8 seed is NC State. So when we talk about these 8 and 9 seeds, my kind of thought is, as of now, so let's just say, you're playing the opposites, even if they're in the, the conference. So we'll say NC State versus Wisconsin. I know there's a bunch of things that will change this. And then Texas A&M versus USC, Iowa versus SMU, Villanova versus Utah State. I will say, I think this would be like the most comfortable. Maybe it's just coming from me, but other people as well would be comfortable in these games. I know 8-9 games are always obviously the hardest to pick. Like, I would be very confident with NC State over Wisconsin. I would be very confident in Texas A&M over USC. I would be very confident in Iowa over SMU. And then I would be very confident, Villanova, in Utah State over Villanova. So it's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just putting this into existence that I hope this comes out. But I don't know. I feel like we have a better feel this season with the predictive metrics of how good these teams are. Like, I think we can all agree NC State is very good. I think NC State can beat anyone in the country, and it kind of shows. They're 25th in the net, 23rd at KenPom, 24th at Torvik. So these predictives are telling you, yeah, they're good. Their resume hasn't been quite as good as their predictives have been, which, predictives are a part of, for those who don't know, it's, win margin. It's who you're beating, how much you're beating them by, I know Doug Gottlieb went on like a big rant. That was the big story for this week of college basketball. Doug Gottlieb is like, KenPom is BS. It's not. It's the most effective model we have, and pretty much everyone can agree on that. And it's weird because Doug Gottlieb is he used to be in the media. In fact, he was in the media while coaching this Green Bay team last season. It's literally the metric that produces the betting line. So when you see, like, for example, we've talked about them. We'll just use them again. UCF, if they were to play a 10 seed like Indiana has good predictives against UCF. Indiana would literally be favored in that game if they were to play each other in the first round because the computers are telling you Indiana's a better team. I know UCF might have won some games. Maybe it's by close margins, maybe a little bit of luck. KenPom does have luck in it. However, Indiana would be favored. And this, like, everyone's like, yeah, there's a reason they're favored. Like, they look like a better basketball team. Now, I'm not disrespecting UCF. Like, UCF could definitely get there, but that's just what these predictive metrics come from. It's a key component in determining national championship contenders. There's all the stats that I use based on, you have to be this good on offensive efficiency, this good in defensive efficiency. Doug Gottlieb basically came out and said, I don't like that point margin and injuries are the big fluke in KenPom's database. I'll agree a little bit with the injuries. However, should USC really be penalized for what they've done so far this season because they just lost Chad Baker-Mazara? I don't know. It also, I understand that component of it a little bit, but like, what are you going to do? Like, what do you want to do? You want him to individually rank every single player, and then when he takes it out, it influences the ranking, so everything's just discredited. It's a stupid argument. Green Bay has actually been better this year under Doug Gottlieb. They're 13-12. However, last year they were 4-28, finished 334th at KenPom. Doug Gottlieb's talking, about how the Horizon League teams, including Green Bay, we're able to schedule these surefire games against teams that have less money. I hate this because it goes against our KenPom ranking or whatever. Like, dude, nobody is desperate to come play Green Bay. No offense. Like, the Horizon League is, I think the whole argument was like, someone asked like, hey, the MAC has had a ton of success this year with Miami of Ohio, Kent State and Akron are really good. What does the Horizon League have to do to catch up? He's like, well, KenPom's BS. We're actually a better conference. Like, dude, you were 4-28 last year, and you lost to a Division II team. So you're talking about these bye games. I don't know. I was glad to see college basketball Twitter and college basketball Instagram kind of come together and just flaming Doug Gottlieb. He's kind of just become kind of a clown show. Although I will say, give credit where credit's due. They are better this season. They're like towards the top of the Horizon League. However, I will go out on a limb and say this team will never win a conference championship with Doug Gottlieb as a coach. He's not a real basketball coach. He is, that would be, if it happens, I'll go on the limb and say, yeah, all right, good for him. But I don't think that's going to happen whatsoever. He's not a good enough basketball coach. All right, enough about that. But that is what NC State has going for them, is these predictive metrics. So I would be very confident taking NC State over Wisconsin. Texas A&M up next as a team who, has good metrics, has good predictive metrics, would take on this USC team. No disrespect to USC. It is like they're hurt right now. I don't think that should discredit them from getting in the NCAA tournament, just like how West Virginia was discredited last year when Tucker DeVries got hurt, which was bogus. I'll admit it. West Virginia should have been in the tournament, but Texas A&M going against USC. We'll see if Elijah Arenas could be awesome. But and then Iowa also has really good predictive metrics. They have a really good coach as well in Ben McCullum, so would have them in the 8 seed range. And then Villanova up next. That would be the toughest one for me, Villanova versus Utah State. Both very similar, both very well-coached teams. Kevin Willard's done a really good job at Villanova in year one. Utah State, Jared Calhoun. Hang on to him while you can. Jared Calhoun might be a heavy pick for a power conference job next season. SMU been fading a little bit, and then we talked about USC and Wisconsin. USC and Wisconsin, very similar resumes. This is one where I said on the last Bracketology, I'll say it on this one as well. I would go USC over Wisconsin strictly because USC won at Wisconsin because they're that close. I think that's kind of the deciding factor. If it's a home game, if USC were to beat Wisconsin at USC, I don't put much judgment in that because you should win on your home court. When they win at Wisconsin and it's similar resumes, I'll give USC a little bit over Wisconsin in that one. 10 seed St. Mary's kind of just hanging on. They've been fine in the WCC. Got to keep it going, though. Georgia, not as good a resume as you might think. We've talked a lot about Georgia this season. They're 35th in the net. They're starting to even, their predictive metrics were good for a lot of the season because they were beating teams badly, but they're starting to level out a little bit. They haven't been great in SEC play. They have a quad 3 loss. They are pretty good in the first 2 quadrants, though. They're 6-5 in the first 2 quadrants. They are 38th in strength of record, 45th in wins above bubble. In decent shape, but hanging on towards the bubble. I think this Georgia team's good. I would like them if, sorry, UCF, you're going to catch another stray. If they played UCF, I would like Georgia in that game, but we got to see. You got to schedule a little bit better in the non-conference next year if you're Mike White. Indiana up next as your next number 10 seed, and UCLA right after that. Another head-to-head battle that just happened. Indiana did beat UCLA, but both teams inside the tournament, but not that comfortably. Next up, Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio out of the MAC. I have them ahead of Miami, Florida. I have them ahead of these first 4 games as well. So I would have Miami of Ohio as an automatic qualifier. However, it's just, it's such a good story. They're actually 8th in the country in luck. So they've been lucky to get, any team that's undefeated is going to be lucky at some point. Arizona has been lucky. Remember, they were like down to UCLA earlier in the season. They've had some luck. They escaped BYU, but Miami of Ohio is one of the luckiest teams in the country. It's a great story. I hope they keep it up. I've kind of said for a while, I hope we get a 2-bid MAC. Obviously I'd rather see like an undefeated Miami regulars going into the NCAA tournament. If they were undefeated, that would be awesome. If they do end up undefeated, I don't think they'd be an 11 seed. I think they'd probably be like an 8 or 9 seed. However, my kind of prediction is that Miami of Ohio will go into the MAC tournament. They got to get past Marshall this week. That's going to be probably their toughest game. If they get past Marshall and they go to the MAC tournament, undefeated. I think Akron's going to win the MAC tournament just because they got to play for a little bit more, because I think Miami might buy into a little bit of contentness that they're in the tournament, even if they don't win the MAC tournament. And then I think we're going to see a 2-bid MAC. How awesome would that be? Get Akron in there, get Miami of Ohio in there. The brothers, John Gross and Travis Steele, they are, brothers. That would be a lot of fun. But Miami of Ohio, I would have as an automatic qualifier. And then Miami, Florida as your last bye team. So back-to-back Miami schools, Miami, Florida, just behind Miami of Ohio. Who would have ever thought that one? So I'll switch graphics here and talk about the bubble graphics. So our last 4 byes, as we mentioned, Georgia, Indiana, UCLA, and Miami, Florida. Now our last 4 in. Texas, who has a very weird resume. However, Texas doesn't have great numbers in terms of, they're 50th in strength of record, 50th in wins above bubble. However, they've proven they can beat some elite teams. They have 3 quad 1A wins. That is very, very rare for a bubble team. They have proven that they can, compete. I think that's enough to get them in, even without the strength of record and wins above bubble being that awesome. New Mexico right behind them. I know they just lost at home. I think their numbers are the resume numbers are better than this team actually is. I think this is a good team, but they're 42nd in strength of record, 44th in wins above bubble. So that's a little bit better than Texas, like we just said. However, they have 0 quad 1A wins, only 1 quad 1 win, and a quad 3 loss. The predictives aren't as good as Texas. So these are going to be some very differentiating resumes. Now, the ones I did want to talk about, I'll pull up actually the second graphic. So, I will just say I have Cal and Oklahoma State inside the tournament, with Ohio State on the outside looking in. Ohio State would be your team that could sneak in right now, in my opinion. So I'm going to compare Cal and Ohio State because, quite frankly, Oklahoma State is actually 61st in the net, but they have really good resume metrics, which is similar for Cal. So I'm going to use the Cal comparison because Oklahoma State and Cal have similar resumes. So here is your second graphic. So if you find Ohio State, they're 41st in the net. This is sorted by net. Then you find California, who's 55th in the net. So you look at these predictives on the right side, and it's all Ohio State. Ohio State 37th in BPI, 42nd in KenPom, 39th at Torvik. Look at Cal, 69th in BPI, 61st at KenPom, 61st at Torvik. So every computer is telling you Ohio State's better than Cal. If Ohio State were to play Cal on a neutral site, Ohio State would be favored by quite a few points. However, when you look at the resume, that is what should get you into the tournament. What have you done to deserve to get into the tournament? You look at Cal, they're 47th in strength of record, 40th in wins above bubble, and 42nd in KPI. You look at Ohio State, 49th in strength of record, 51st in wins above bubble, and 57th in KPI. All those lead Cal. When you don't have good predictive metrics like Cal, like we said, an average of 63.7, that's usually what puts you to Dayton. You've done enough to get into the tournament, yet you're going to have to prove yourself in that first 4 sort of game on that first day of March Madness. Oklahoma State is also in a very similar situation as Cal, very similar, really good resume-based metrics, which is why I lean Oklahoma State and Cal over Ohio State. I would hope at this moment in time that the committee would agree. These teams have done enough to get in. Ohio State hasn't done enough to get in. Ohio State has 0 quad 1 wins. Cal has 3. Oklahoma State they only have 1, but they have 1. Oklahoma State's 7-6 inside the first 2 quadrants. Ohio State is 5-7. I know the computers are telling you Ohio State's better, but here's where I heavily lean towards those resume-based metrics. Hopefully that all made sense. All right, so I would have Ohio State as your first team out. San Diego State right behind them. Santa Clara right behind them. I do think there's a gap between Ohio State to San Diego State, and then San Diego State through Virginia Tech to Missouri. So the bubble's starting to separate a little bit of itself. However, Oklahoma State and Cal were both next 4 out teams. You pick up some big wins, you boost that resume. Ohio State still doesn't pick up a big win. You can jump into those last 4 in. So like we said, Ohio State, San Diego State, Santa Clara up next out of the WCC. Santa Clara is right there to maybe win the WCC regular season with that Gonzaga loss to Portland. Seton Hall also in the first 4 out just hasn't been playing well as of late. Virginia Tech hasn't had any, real luck this season, we'll say. Speaking of unlucky teams, we talked about Miami being lucky. Virginia Tech been one of the unluckiest teams. They will have opportunities in the ACC to pick up some wins, as will Missouri in the SEC. However, Missouri is a clear cut behind Virginia Tech, in my opinion. Then George Mason, who only has 2 losses, but has not played a tough schedule whatsoever in the A-10. And then VCU also in the A-10 as your next 4 out team. So let's go back to to the bracketology graphics. So I would have Texas playing New Mexico and Cal playing Oklahoma State. Would be a pretty entertaining first four matchups, in my opinion. All right, let's move on and talk about the mid-majors now. So we'll talk about the 12 through 16 seeds. I'm actually noticing right now that one of the teams is actually wrong, so I'll talk about them. Actually, it's going to be the last team we talk about, so hopefully you're even still interested by then. Tulsa as your automatic qualifier out of the American. Tulsa, don't look now, maybe has a slight chance of being an at-large team. I don't think they can get there, but if a ton went their way and they ran the table and then like lost in the championship game to, say, South Florida, Tulsa's 20-3 on the season. They're 55th at KenPom. This team's really good. They have the 22nd ranked offense in the entire country. This team is really good on offense. South Florida could be another team that wins the conference tournament. They've got a lot of talent there. Charlotte's also been decent, at least in American play. Memphis, you always kind of got to include. And then the other two teams I would mention is Florida Atlantic and Wichita State as potential teams to win the American Conference. Looks like it will most likely be a one-bid league, but if Tulsa gets all the way to the championship game and loses to South Florida, maybe there's a conversation to be had as long as, the bubble teams they keep struggling, which it seems that they might. Up next, the team I've been kind of praising for a while. This would be my 12 seed that I think I'm ride or die with. I will be taking them to beat a 5 seed no matter, well, we'll see what the matchup is. Like if Florida were to drop to a 5 seed, I'd be like, well, that sucks. But I love this Belmont team. Belmont's fantastic. They're 21-3 on the season. They're kind of running through the Missouri Valley now. They've really picked up some steam as of late. They're 45th in offensive rating, and they're not too shabby on the defensive end as well. This isn't your typical Belmont team just fire away from three. Like they can still shoot the three, but they're good on the inside. Pretty solid on the defensive end. Belmont is the team to beat out of the Missouri Valley. Other teams to kind of know. Murray State has been solid all season. Bradley's actually picked it up. However, I don't think Bradley's very good. Illinois State would be the other one to kind of keep an eye on. They've got some firepower in the offensive end. Northern Iowa, also a pretty solid team, but have really struggled in Missouri Valley play. Up next, Liberty out of Conference USA. There's only a couple teams in the country that are still undefeated in their respective conferences. Liberty is 11-0. They've played really good basketball. They're 19-3 on the season. They have the coach. They have Zach Cleveland, who's one of the best players in the country. Not in the country. He's the best player in the conference, but I'll give him some love. He's one of the better players that is unknown. He's they got veteran leadership. He's a senior. I like this Liberty team. I think they got a chance of picking off an upset come March Madness season. I do think we will see. Last year we were deprived of we saw 2 12 over 5s, didn't we? But one of them was Colorado State. They were overseeded. They should have been like a 10 or 11 seed. And then McNeese did beat Clemson. But was it the year before? I think it was the year before that we didn't see any 12 over 5s. I think we will see one this season. And then Yale as your final 12 seed. I actually flipped Liberty and Yale because Yale's been struggling. Yale just lost to Harvard. Yale and Harvard are actually tied at the top of the Ivy League, but Yale is definitely your best team. Moving on, we talked about how Stephen F. Austin beat McNeese. They would be your first 13 seed right now, could easily jump to a 12 seed if, say, Harvard did win the Ivy League tournament and beat Yale. Then Stephen F. Austin would be ahead of Harvard, which would move Stephen F. Austin to that 12 seed. It's going to be Stephen F. Austin or McNeese, very confident in that. Moving on to the Big South, where it's High Point as your favorite. They got a lot of love in the early season, like we were talking about. They have a chance of going undefeated. Weren't quite that good, but still the team to beat in the Big South. Them and Winthrop. Winthrop would be your other one to kind of keep an eye on. Up next, out of the WAC, Utah Valley back in the conversation after UT Arlington suffered a loss. Utah Valley is the best team in the WAC. However, they have kind of struggled in the WAC this season, and the WAC is better than you might think. Now, they don't have a lot of teams, so they don't have any real terrible teams. But it's Utah Valley, Cal Baptist, and UT Arlington. Utah Valley's a world above everyone, and then it's Cal Baptist and then UT Arlington, in my opinion. But Cal Baptist, well-coached team, has a chance to maybe make a run there, but I would definitely go with Utah Valley out of the WAC, and then up to a 13 seed, move from a 14 seed to a 13 seed out of the CAA, UNC Wilmington. So they are 19-3 on the season, 8-1 in the conference. Takayo Siddle will be another popular name to take a bigger job this upcoming offseason. They look like they're for sure the best team in the CAA, in my opinion. Charleston's right there. Charleston's got talent, but I don't think they're quite to the level of UNC Wilmington. But this is always a really fun conference race to kind of watch and, conference tournament. William and Mary is also another team to look out for. And then Hofstra would be the other one I would mention. I think it will be William and Mary, Hofstra, Charleston, UNC Wilmington. Hopefully those are your final 4 teams playing for a conference berth. Moving on, 14 seed. So I had Hawaii, and then UC Irvine beat Hawaii. UC Irvine moves in. UNC Wilmington is ahead of UC Irvine, in my opinion. UC Irvine out of the Big West. It's going to be UC Irvine or Hawaii, in my opinion. UC San Diego has also, they were good to start the season, have really been struggling in conference play. They're 5-6 in conference play, but they're better than that. UC Santa Barbara is also fine. Always a fun conference race to kind of watch. On to the Summit League, North Dakota State, another team that is undefeated in their conference so far. They are 9-0. It's going to be North Dakota State or it's going to be St. Thomas. Both teams really fun. Both teams very evenly matched. They played a good game earlier this season, so I hope it's those two battling it out for the Summit League championship. Moving on, talking about Troy out of the Sun Belt, where Troy has really actually been fading a little bit as of late. They played really well earlier in the season, took San Diego State and USC to overtime, actually beat San Diego State. Have kind of struggled a little bit down the stretch here in Sun Belt play. I will say Appalachian State has probably been the team that's the hottest in the conference right now. They're 9-4. Troy is 9-3 in the conference, so they're very close. Other teams to kind of note: Marshall, like we said, Marshall has to play against Miami of Ohio, and that game will be played at Marshall. So be careful, Miami of Ohio. South Alabama is also pretty good, and then Arkansas State is another team to kind of watch out for in the Sun Belt. Moving on, talking about the SoCon, which has been so incredible. I say it every time I talk about this. I'm like, God, this conference is disappointing this year. East Tennessee State is your team to beat. They're 9-2 in the conference. Wofford is 8-3, and Mercer is 7-3. Furman is the team to kind of watch out for, in my opinion. They've got some talent. They're a well-coached team. God, Chattanooga has been so disappointing this year. I know they turned over the roster, but I think that roster's got a lot of talent. But it's East Tennessee State as of now. They're the highest-ranked team at KenPom and leading the conference as of now. Moving on to the Horizon League, it's not Doug Gottlieb and the KenPom-hating Green Bay team. It is Wright State, who has been kind of the class of the league right now. So Wright State is 10-3 in the conference. Oakland 10-4 in the conference under Greg Campy. However, Wright State went to Oakland earlier in the season and gave it to Oakland pretty badly. Would lean like Wright State right now. Like I said, Green Bay not going to win the conference. They're still 228th at KenPom. Wright State's 139th. Oakland's 130th. Maybe watch out for Robert Morris. They've been playing okay in Youngstown State. No slouch either, although Youngstown State really been struggling in conference play. Moving on, talking about the ASUN, where it is now Austin Peay. So Lipscomb has suffered a couple losses. Central Arkansas in second place. I don't think they're going to win the conference, but you never know. It looks like to me it's going to be Austin Peay or Lipscomb. Lipscomb's still really good. Florida Gulf Coast would be my sleeper as a chance. Queens is still right in the conversation, but going with Austin Peay right now onto the Big Sky, where we are going to talk about Portland State. Portland State is the class of this league right now, in my opinion. Montana has Money Williams. I've talked about him quite a bit. He's the best player in the conference. But Portland State, Terry Miller, Jalen Henderson, two really fun players, both seniors, upperclassmen. Montana State is also right in the conversation with Montana, so I would expect it to be one of those three teams, but I think this is going to be the season that Portland State gets through and gets to the NCAA tournament. And then UT Martin out of the Ohio Valley. UT Martin beat some good teams earlier in the season. They're 196th at KenPom, which is pretty good out of the OVC nowadays. They're 10-2 in the conference, by far the best team. Watch out for Southeast Missouri as well. Little Rock also has a little bit of talent to kind of watch out for. However, they've been disappointing this season. My God, I almost in our preseason best bet show said Little Rock, and I held off, didn't do it. Thank God I didn't. They are 6-6 in the conference. I thought that team was going to be good. Moving on to the Patriot League, where it's Navy. Navy has overtaken, I thought this was going to be Colgate or American. It's been Navy the entire way. Navy's 10-1 in the conference. Colgate's 8-3, the team behind them. And then American is in third place at 6-5. So Navy is off and running. It's going to be Navy or Colgate, in my opinion. Moving on to the MAAC, Merrimack. For those who don't know, I love this conference. The MAAC, if you don't watch low major hoops and you're looking to get into it, start with the MAAC. This one's so fun. Merrimack is right there at 10-2. The reason this one's so fun is they're always so top heavy. There's always like 4 teams that are like dead even and really good. Merrimack has been your best team. Sienna's actually Marist is your highest ranked team at KenPom. They're 9-4 though. In fourth place, Siena and St. Peter's are one game behind Merrimack at 9-3. And then Quinnipiac, who's my pick pretty much every season coming into the season, they're 8-5, so they're still right there. But those 5 teams could all realistically win the conference tournament. Iona is actually no slouch whatsoever either. They had a pretty good non-conference over there, 6-6 in this conference. I love this conference. This is such a fun one to watch. It will not be Rider. Rider is in last in this conference, and they are terrible. But those top 6, really, really fun conference race to kind of pay attention to. And then our final ones, LIU out of the NEC. LIU, I believe they just won at Central Connecticut State. Did they win that game? Yes, they won at Central Connecticut. I thought that was kind of going to be a little bit of a test for LIU because Central Connecticut has been the best program in this league. They went to Central Connecticut and beat them by 21. It's LIU right now until it's not. Lemoyne is also right there, but LIU actually has a 2.5 game lead in this conference. So they are definitely the team to beat. And then Bethune-Cookman. I actually jumped Bethune-Cookman over Vermont for those who care. Bethune-Cookman out of the SWAC has been playing really good as of late. This is a team where if there's one 16 seed I don't want to play, LIU's fine, but it's Bethune-Cookman because they do have some actual talent on their team. They're 11-11, and like they're not fantastic. They're 221st at KenPom. However, the next best team is Southern in the SWAC, and they are 273rd. Bethune-Cookman is good. They have high major talent. Jacoby Heedy is a really good player. Bethune-Cookman 8-1 in the conference, however, rough non-conference. But that would be the team I'd be like, oh, I don't really want to draw them as a 16 seed. So like I said, I did drop Vermont down to the last 16 versus 16 matchup in the first 4 out of the America East. The America East is so far down this season. Vermont and UMBC and NJIT are all tied for first in the conference at 6-2. It should be one of those 3. I think it'll be Vermont or UMBC. Quite frankly, Vermont is the highest ranked at KenPom at 222nd. And then out of the MEAC, this is the one I said I messed up, so I will have to change it. It was Maryland Eastern Shore. I have to change it to NC Central. I forgot to. So when I messed up, I'm glad I caught it now before posting it. This conference is terrible, but we'll see. NC Central's 8-12 on the season. However, they're 4-1 in conference play. They're 343rd at KenPom. Howard is your highest ranked team at KenPom. They are 253rd, so kind of watch out for Howard as well, the Bison. All righty, that's going to do it for the show today. I know that was a lot of talking, kind of a lot of all over the place, but hopefully you enjoyed talking some bracketology as we are, about 5 weeks away from having a bracket. That's exciting time, so it's right around the corner. Like I said, we're going to have these shows every Thursday. However, I just one Friday, I think it's in 2 weeks, I want to have a live bracketology show where I interact with people. So I'm going to post a thing on our Instagram before that to ask your questions, comments about bracketology, and I'll get to them. I'll give you a shout out. So be sure to come back for that. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show, turn on the post notifications, and follow us on Instagram at Bracket Science with 2 S's. We will be back. The show will actually release tomorrow as you're listening to it. Tomorrow about 5 o'clock, I'm going to preview the weekend, talk about the UNC Duke game, talk about all those big games, along with that bracket stat involving freshmen. So be sure to come back for that tomorrow. We'll talk to you again in about 28 hours. Till then, take care.